welcome to another video exploring the Confucian Analects. Now this is a photo from Hong Kong's Tai Mo Shan, tallest mountain in Hong Kong, looking roughly north, maybe northeast. And there's some Shenzhen in mainland China in the background here. And Cloudy Hill in Hong Kong, Longshan or Dragon Mountain in Hong Kong. Anyway, it's just a beautiful picture I selected for the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Let's talk about the rectification of names, as it's often referred to. Maybe that's not the best terminology. I think it's suitable. We'll probably get an alternative terminology when we look at another translation. So Confucius is concerned with what is often called the rectification of names. Let's start by just looking at, let's start with a simple James Legge translation. Let's see. So book 13, section 3. Sorry, I apparently didn't have all my tabs and windows properly ordered, and this is getting really annoying. Okay, there we go. It's just a few days before Thanksgiving. I haven't waited to start Christmas music, so that's some skilled musician playing some magnificent Trans-Siberian Orchestra stuff on piano. But I didn't mean to alt-tab to it. All right, so book 13, section 3, was it? Oh, there it is, right here. Zilu says, the ruler of Wei has been waiting for you in order with you to administer the government. And what will you consider the first thing to be done? And the master, that is Confucius, replied, what is necessary is to rectify names. So indeed, said Zilu, you are wide of the mark. Why must there be such rectification? The master said, how uncultivated you are, you being his informal name for Zilu. A superior man, in regard to what he does not know, shows a cautious reserve. If names be not correct, language is not in accordance with the truth of things. If language be not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success. When affairs cannot be carried on to success, proprieties in music will not flourish. When proprieties in music do not flourish, punishments will not be properly awarded. When punishments are not properly awarded, the people do not know how to move hand or foot. Therefore, a superior man considers it necessary that the names he used may be spoken appropriately, and also that what he speaks may be carried out appropriately. What the superior man requires is just that in his words there may be nothing incorrect. All right, so you have to rectify names for all these reasons. And if names are not in accordance with the truth of things, if language is not in accordance with the truth of things, then we can't carry on our business to success. And then ritual or rite or human cultural practices that enact moral principles will not be carried on properly, and neither will music. And then punishments will not be properly awarded. And then the people won't know how to move hand or foot. Therefore, the rectification of names must be a huge priority. Now let's just clear away one minor detail, relatively minor compared to all the other awesome stuff anyway, that I come across here. This is the Oxford World Classics edition. And the editor, actually, maybe it's the translator, if there's a distinction in this book. Anyway, the notes in the back of the book clarify this about proprieties or rites or ritual. That's the Confucian Li. When these things and music do not flourish, punishments will not be properly awarded. This text will clarify in the notes, the editorial notes in the back of the book, why that connection is there. So let's just clarify that, and then we'll move on to figuring out everything else. What is Confucius talking about here? Rectify names. The word here translated rectify is again the word zhang, correct, which as we've seen is related to zhang, government. Rights, which parallels proprieties here, rights and music are linked with punishment because the latter is the constraint which has to be used to control the people who cannot be guided by the example enshrined in ritual behavior and celebrated in music. Let me see if I can paraphrase that. The reason rights or proprieties or lei and music are linked to punishment is that punishment is what is done to control people who can't be guided by rights and music. Rights are supposed to ritualize good behavior. Music is supposed to celebrate good behavior. And punishment is meant to correct the people who won't be corrected otherwise. So let me put it this way. In fact, there's so much to talk about. Everything connects to everything else in the Analects. At some risk of going too far afield and losing my train of thought, let's go to an earlier passage in the Analects about cultural, I don't know what word to use, cultural influences, cultural patterns, cultural things that go deeper than law and punishment and make human beings good human beings. Let's see. I'm gonna have to try to remember some exact wording, so I'm gonna pause, drink some tea while I try to remember the exact. Got it. In the Legg translation, I want to look at the passage that says, if the people be led by laws and uniformity sought to be given them by punishments, they will try to avoid the punishment, but have no sense of shame. If they be led by virtue and uniformity sought to be given them by the rules of propriety, i.e. ritual right, they will have the sense of shame and moreover will become good. The master said, Confucius said, laws and punishments will lead people to avoid punishment, but it won't give them a proper moral sense such that they have within themselves a sense of shame at doing wrong. But if you train people through virtue and ritualized good behavior to be good, then they can have the internal sense of shame at doing wrong. Now, this is a little far afield where we're not focusing on what we're supposed to be focusing on here. So I'm not going to pause and review this passage and other translations and talk about it any further. The point is, there are things that go deeper than law and punishment. And among them are rules of propriety, ritual, right, and music. Music and proprieties or ritual are the things that help us be good without the need for law and punishment. Law and punishment will help to fill in the gap, though. So that's what the editorial work here clarifies as to why why this connection is made when affairs cannot be carried on to success, proprieties and music will not flourish. So now, having made that observation, I think we want to look at two other translations of this passage and then look at two or three commentaries on what it means, as well as my own claims about my own suspicions, my own interpretations, my own working interpretation of this passage and what's going on here and why it's so important to rectify names. So let's start with the Oxford World Classics translation. We're in Analects, Book 13, Section 3. Zilu said, if the Lord of Wei were waiting for you to run the government, what would you give priority to? The master said, what is necessary is to rectify names, is it not? Zilu said, if this were to take place, it would surely be an aberration of yours. Why should they be rectified? What's the most important thing? To fix names, says Confucius. His disciple Zilu asks, really? Seriously? That's the most important thing? Why? And Zilu says, how uncivilized you are. With regard to what he does not understand, the gentleman is surely somewhat reluctant to offer an opinion. It looks like he's telling Zilu, you silly person, if you don't understand, why would you disagree? If names are not rectified, then words are not appropriate. If words are not appropriate, then deeds are not accomplished. I like this smoother translation of instead of affairs cannot be carried on to success, deeds are not accomplished. If words are not appropriate, then deeds are not accomplished. If deeds are not accomplished, then the rights, that's right, R-I-T-E, rights and music do not flourish. If the rights and music do not flourish, then punishments do not hit the mark. If punishments do not hit the mark, then the people have nowhere to put hand or foot. So when a gentleman names something, the name can definitely be used in speech. And when he says something, it can definitely be put into practice. In his utterances, the gentleman is definitely not casual about anything. So for the same reason, we have to use words properly, and a gentleman will use words properly. Now, this word gentleman, maybe I need to do a video on this later. I have little to no knowledge of my own here, but the word gentleman properly refers to some sort of upper class Englishman originally, but later it came to have a moral sense. Well, that's exactly what happens with this term, 君子. pardon my bad pronunciation, originally meant son of a prince, the someone from the nobility. Confucius imbues the term with a special meaning. Sometimes used strictly in its original sense, it also refers to a person who has made significant progress in the Dao, developing a sense of justice, etc., etc. The virtues, though Junzi is a highly advanced human being, he's still distinguished from the category of sage, who is more of a divine being, usually a model from great antiquity. You can read this on your own if you want to go to the online Charles Muller edition of the Analects. Okay, so the word translated here, gentleman, I would imagine is this word, and maybe I'll check that later. And so copy and paste this and double check the original Chinese there. When a gentleman names something, the name can definitely be used in speech. When he says something, they can definitely be put into practice. So a truly noble person, although there are connotations here for rulers, because the whole context is Zilu is asking Confucius what sort of advice you would give to a ruler. So the advice to the ruler here is, I think, combining both ideas of Junzi, of this term, of the noble person in the social sense, the ruler person, prince, son of a prince, the ruler, but also the moral gentleman, the moral nobility, the moral Junzi. He's combining both concepts here, I think. What was I talking about? Confucius telling Zilu, when a gentleman in this sense, a Junzi, names something, the name can definitely be used in speech. When he says something, he can definitely put it into practice. So he's using words clearly and accurately so that people know what to do, people know how to act. So we still haven't come to interpreting the passage. Let's go to one more translation. We are in the Charles Muller translation, and this passage is book 13. Section 3. Now, let's double check. Of course, this would happen. Let's double check the terminology there. As suspected, Junzi, pardon my bad pronunciation, this term for gentleman, son of a prince, but combining the moral sense with, or combining Confucius' perhaps somewhat novel moral sense with the etymological sense of the ruler, the nobility. And that's the term used here. Okay, so Zilu said, is there any confusion on Zilu versus Zilu? Same name, different systems for transliterating into English style lettering, Roman letters. Zilu says, the ruler of Wei is anticipating your assistance in the administration of his state. What will be your top priority? So similar context, what advice, Confucius, Master Kong, will you give to a ruler? Confucius said, there must be a correction of terminology. So here's an alternative translation. If you don't want to say rectification of names, you can say correction of terminology. Zilu says, are you serious? Why is this so important? Confucius says, you really are simple, aren't you? A nobleman, Junzi, is cautious about jumping to conclusions about that which he does not know. So, come on, Zilu, you don't understand this. Why are you disagreeing with me? I think that reading of that line is still pretty solid. All right, now elaborating on our priority here. If terminology is not corrected, then what is said cannot be followed. If what is said cannot be followed, then work cannot be accomplished. I like that smooth English translation. Instead of affairs cannot be carried on to success, work cannot be accomplished. If terminology is not correct, what is said cannot be followed, in which case work cannot be accomplished, in which case ritual and music cannot be developed. So here's his translation, ritual and music for propriety in music from Legge, or rite, R-I-T-E, in music from Oxford World Classics, but using the same concept of Confucian li, lai, ritual or rite, or sacred moral customs. Maybe it's best I don't translate that word. If ritual and music cannot be developed, then criminal punishments will not be appropriate. If criminal punishments are not appropriate, the people cannot make a move. Therefore, the nobleman needs to have his terminology applicable to real language, and his speech must accord with his actions. The speech of the nobleman cannot be indefinite. Oh, I like this. His speech must accord with his actions. A characteristic of a proper gentleman, Junzi, who lives up to the name, is that his actions and his words correspond. Now, there is so much to talk about, and I'll probably just need to make a note to do a proper video on actions corresponding with words in these texts. I need to talk about that later. There's some wonderful stuff here and in some of the other ancient Confucian texts. And part of that is the theme here. So now let's start interpreting this passage in more detail. What are we talking about here? Let's go back to my provisional notes. You could read this very simply as Confucius just saying it's important to learn how to use the proper names for things or to speak clearly. And when I think of this simple reading of the passage, I always think of Plato's Phaedo. So I'm looking at the Hackett edition of the Complete Works of Plato here, and I'm in Plato's Phaedo. And this is Socrates' death scene towards the end of the Phaedo. And Crito, Socrates' friend Crito asks, "How shall we bury you?" Socrates says, "In any way you like," said Socrates, "if you can catch me and I do not escape you." Laughing quietly, looking at us, he said, "I do not convince Crito that I am this Socrates talking to you here and ordering all I say, but he thinks that I am the thing which he will soon be looking at as a corpse, and so he asked how we shall bury me, etc., etc. For you know well, my dear Crito, that to express oneself badly is not only faulty as far as the language goes, but does some harm to the soul. To express oneself badly does harm to the soul." Okay, so what's Socrates talking about here? Crito, Socrates is about to die. Crito asks, "How shall we bury you?" And Socrates says, "Dude, I've just been talking for 3 hours. I don't know how many hours it was. I've just been talking for hours about how there's life after death, and we have a non-physical soul that continues after the body, and that's where personal identity really is. So I am the soul, not the body. You're not going to bury me. You can't bury a soul. You're going to bury my body. Who cares? I don't care. The soul is what matters." Use your language carefully, because you train yourself, and perhaps others as well, in foolish thoughts that can lead to immoral behaviors if you speak foolishly. You have to use the proper words for things. Don't say, "Where are we going to bury you?" because you don't bury a person. You bury a body that doesn't have a person connected to it anymore. The person is the soul, and that's what leads to a moral life. Understanding that the person is the soul and not the body. The soul is more important. The moral behavior requires an understanding of the metaphysics of the human being, which is to say, we are soul, not body. This is Socrates' way of talking. I don't necessarily agree. I'm too Christian to agree completely with this. The body is a part of what a human being is, but the point is, Socrates says bad language, not words that might get bleeped out or something, but careless or imprecise or inaccurate language is a mistake, not only as far as language is concerned, but it can do some harm to the soul. So I think something like that is a perfectly respectable reading of these passages in the Analects. Relearn how to use proper names for things or speak clearly, because, it's just good. It's better for morality. Now, there's a lot more going on here. Some of this is a little more clear in one translation than another. I don't find this very clear in the Legg translation, but Oxford World Classics and Muller here do make it fairly clear that here is a very respectable interpretation of the passage. When we say an important principle for government is clear instructions. So tell that to the IRS. To be fair, IRS actually does have instructions. It's not the instructions that aren't clear so much as it is the hellish, nightmarish complexity of the tax code in the USA. But at least the instructions are clear. So full points to the IRS for at least giving us clear instructions. But the maybe I shouldn't say tell it to the IRS. Maybe I should say tell it to Congress, whoever makes these regulations. Well, I guess Congress doesn't make all the regulations. And anyway, the problem is the government's not giving clear instructions here because the laws are not clear, even if the IRS, to be fair, does put out some pretty useful instructional documents. So the importance of this passage is largely that government needs to learn how to give instructions clearly and accurately. So it's important to line up our words with reality. And among other things, that means government needs to give instructions clearly and accurately. But there's another really important aspect of this passage, I think, that I want to mention. And maybe I'll be able to say that, then maybe we'll end this video. I feel like it's gone on too long already. I think this passage is also about lining up our actions with our words. So it's important not just to fit our words to realities, but also fit our lives to words. And which words are we talking about? Well, his speech must accord with his actions. Our lives ought to live up to the moral principles we profess. But that's maybe not the major point here. The major point here is the very combination we're talking about here of, what was that word? Do I still have it there? This. This word that originally refers to someone from the nobility, a ruler or someone from the ruler class, becomes a moral word referring to a particular kind of moral person, not someone from the noble upper class of society, but someone who is morally noble. And these two things are supposed to be combined. And if you are a socially, politically noble person, you ought to live up to it by being a morally noble person. That, I think, is one crucial aspect of this passage. And now let me try to clarify it just a bit more. I think the idea here is not just that we make our words fit reality, but that we make the reality of our lives fit the words that apply to our lives. We have to bring our behavior in line with the names that attach to ourselves. So a husband should live up to the name husband by taking good care of his wife. A son should live up to the name son by honoring and caring for his parents. And a ruler should live up to the name that describes the kind of ruler he is by caring for the welfare of his people and by being good, by being a tunza, by being this. By being this kind of noble person morally and not just in terms of your political, social position. So bring behavior in line with the names that describe our responsibilities. That, I think, is one very important aspect of the rectification of names. Now, it's not so clear that you get it straight out of this passage, but let me cite some precedent for that. Let's start with classic James Legge. Legge commenting on, where did I put all my notes? Legge commenting on, well, that's the wrong passage. Legge commenting on book 13, section 3, where we've been reading. Comments on the rectification of names and says, the answer is substantially the same as the reply to someone in book 12, section 11, that government obtains with the prince's prince, the father, father, etc. That is, when each man in his relations is what the name of his relation would require. In other words, the answer Confucius is giving here about the rectification of names, or what's the alternative phrasing? Correction of terminology. Legge is telling us here in this hard copy version I've got of public domain Legge translation plus Chinese script plus Legge's commentary. Legge is telling us, Legge is giving us this interpretation. Legge is telling us our lives need to be aligned with the names that describe our obligations in the world. Government obtains with the prince's prince, the father, father, etc. And each person in his relations is what the name of his relation would require. When each of us is in our relations to others, what the name of that relation requires. With various examples: king, minister, prince, son, husband, wife, father, daughter, mother, king, duke, etc., etc. So Legge agrees is the point. Now let's go to this one. The Gardner, very short intro to Confucianism, page 57. He's actually talking about Mencius, Confucian philosopher, a little bit later. In arguing that a sovereign is to be called sovereign only when he comports himself as a true sovereign should, Mencius has associated himself with his master's call, that is Confucius' call, for the rectification of names, the belief that names in reality must be brought into perfect accord, citing Analects, Book 13, Section 13. Names in reality must be brought into perfect accord. Now, again, it's totally fine to say that means align names to facts. That's true, but it also means align those facts under your control, namely your behavior, with the names that describe your responsibilities. Etc. Mencius' point here, which will resonate powerfully throughout imperial Chinese history, is that a ruler who does not behave as a true sovereign, caring for the people with benevolence and righteousness, or Yan, Ren, and Yi, righteousness, justice, may be deposed. Never mind later historical context in Mencius. A ruler must behave as a true sovereign. Names and reality must be brought into perfect accord. Okay, so Gardner and Legg both have this understanding of the passage. I quite agree. Now let's go to the connection made by James Legg, Book 12, Section 11 there. Book 12, Section 11. Oxford World Classics translations. Duke Jing of Qi asked Master Kong about government. Master Kong replied, let a ruler be a ruler, a subject, a father, and a son. Excellent, said the Duke. Indeed, if a ruler be not a ruler, a subject be not a subject, a father be not a father, and a son be not a son, even if there is grain, shall I manage to eat it? And Legg. No, we'll get to this Legg commentary later. Let's go to the Legg translation. Where were we? Book 12, Section 11. Jing of Qi asked Confucius about government. Confucius replied, there is government when the prince is prince, the minister is minister, when the father is father, and the son son. And when that's not the case, even if I have my revenue, can I enjoy it? Says the Duke. Muller translation, Book 12, Section 11. Darn, wrong button there. Duke Jing of Qi asked Confucius about government. Confucius replied, let the ruler be a ruler, minister be a minister, father be a father, son be a son. The Duke said, excellent. Indeed, if that's not the case, even if I have food, how can I eat it? So the requirement is our behavior must line up with our responsibilities, and those are the responsibilities described by our names. Names like ruler, minister, father, son. If a ruler, minister, father, son does not live up to the responsibilities of a ruler, minister, father, or son, then he's not a true ruler, minister, father, or son. Rectify the names by making our lives line up with those names is largely the point here. I got so many books I'm trying to keep track. Notes I want to, things I want to observe, notes to mention. Let's now go to another passage I think connects to the same idea. Book 6, Section 25. The master said, a cornered vessel without corners, a strange cornered vessel, a strange cornered vessel. Muller translation, the master said, a cornered vessel without corners. Is it a cornered vessel or not? Book 625, where this edition will not even translate the word that these other guys are translating cornered vessel. I'm sure my pronunciation is terrible. The master said, even if a gu, Gu, is not used as a gu, it's indeed a gu. It is indeed a gu. That's the word that they're translating cornered vessel. So now let's go to the editorial notes in the back of the book on this passage. This word here, Gu, refers to a bronze ritual vessel. The implication is presumably that, although a ritual vessel may be misused, it remains a ritual vessel, whereas a gentleman, a term which presupposes adherence to standards of moral behavior, does not necessarily always remain a gentleman. So the point being, a cornered vessel without corners could still be or a vessel, a ritual vessel misused would still be a ritual vessel. I better not say cornered vessel without corners. I should say ritual vessel misused. I don't know how to say it. When we're talking about these inanimate objects, we can draw a comparison and a contrast to human beings. A human being not living up to the kind of human being he or she is not necessarily really that kind of human being. Rectification of names. If you're not living up to your responsibilities, maybe you're not a true instance of that kind of human being. So Legge comments similarly, saying the name without the reality is folly. This was spoken with reference to the governments of the time, retaining ancient names without ancient principles. It's a political critique. And then Legge refers to this term. That would be the GU, the thing they're translating as cornered vessel. This was a drinking vessel. Others say a wooden tablet. The latter was a later use of the term. It was made with corners, as appears in the composition of the character, etc. Confucius' time, the form was changed while the name was kept. So there's some backstory. According to Legge, anyway, I can't vouch for this, but according to Legge, they kept the name, which denoted a cornered vessel, even though the term was then being used for a thing that didn't actually have the corners anymore. I can't guarantee this is the best translation or even a great commentary on the backstory on the word, but the point that I find looking at this passage, and for whatever it's worth, Legge and the editorial work in the back of the Oxford World Classics edition agree. The point is, this is another rectification of names passage, and it's not talking about these inanimate objects. Really, it's talking about human beings. We have responsibilities. We need to live up to them, and that's part of what the rectification of names is about. Okay, thanks for watching. That's all.